Today on the Cameron Journal podcast, I'm excited to talk to longtime TV writer and, in a weird way, my best friend's dad, Duke Sandefur. He and I met in Rouge's days last year. He did some wonderful pieces for us. And even though Rouge's has been shuttered, we still talk and trade emails on a regular basis and have absolutely fascinating conversation. So in this interview, we talk about his time writing on Walker, Texas Ranger in the 90s, writing on a handful of network TV shows, and how he got into the TV writing business, as well as his process and him potentially returning to the small screen. So, this is a really interesting interview, especially if you're into screenwriting. This you can't honestly listen to anything better, I think, in terms of finding out what it's like to write for television by someone on the inside, and also just tons of fascinating stories. So this is Duke Sandefur. It's gonna be a great interview, and this one is a bit long because he's a talker, I'm a talker, and so we ended up kind of going over, but it's worth the conversation. It's totally worth it. So here we go. This is Duke Sandefur, TV writer. Let's go. This is the Cameron Journal podcast. It's a place where we talk about important things. It's a place where we bring a little slice of the news to you. It's a place where we do important things, have important conversations. It's also things that I like to talk about. My name is Cameron Cowan, and this is the Cameron Journal podcast. Today on the Cameron Journal podcast, we are happy to welcome longtime TV writer Duke Sandefur to the show. We're going to talk about television, we're going to talk about movies, we're going to talk about writing, and a bunch of other odd sort of things. I had the chance to connect with him because of the magazine me and my best friend used to own together. This is actually his dad, and it's funny because when you meet someone's parent, it starts to make a lot of things about them make sense. So, and I'm sure the converse would be true in my case as well. So welcome, Duke, to the Cameron Journal podcast. How are you today?
Thank you, Cameron. I'm well. We've
Good.
chipped ourselves out of the ice of Southeast Texas, and it's about 80 degrees, and I'm feeling good.
Yes, we're recording this in late February when Texas has just had an actual winter, not pretend winter that they're used to, but actual winter. And yes, so it's fun times. I usually associate Houston with the 121 degree weather I endured in 2005. So
yes,
it's a different experience when it goes the opposite direction. So
we go both ways here in Houston.
Yes, and I think we can certainly look forward to more of that thanks to climate change in the future, unfortunately. However, I wanted to dig right into television and writing because I would be very interested to find out how you got into TV writing to start with. How did that happen?
Well, I would say by accident, but it wasn't entirely. My father was a screenwriter, and I was in college, and I started off on one thing and went to another and went to another. And at my third school, the topic came up in conversation. Why don't you try writing? Since I used to ghost a scene for him or an act, of various shows, just so I knew what he was doing. And I'd watched him do it since I was about 7 years old. And I decided to speculatively write an episode of a new series. So I got a TV guide. This was a print magazine we used to have in the dark ages. And it had a list of all the shows that were premiering in September. And I picked one and wrote an episode. And then it took a little hook and crook to get in front of the guy that I needed to talk to. But I got onto the lot and I laid that script on his desk, and I wound up getting an agent that day and selling my first screenplay or teleplay, if you want to, be specific, to The Amazing Spider-Man on CBS, primetime live action.
Yes, I mean that's a fascinating sort of thing. Most people, who want to write for TV or film would be, they work their whole lives for this sort of thing, and you just kind of by happenstance of birth just kind of happened into it. So,
well, I learned the craft at my father's knee, like you would, whatever your father might do. I was exposed to it more than anything else. He was also a dentist, and he said he would not support me in that endeavor if I wanted to be a dentist. And since I knew how to do a screenplay, I knew how to write, and I knew somewhat how to put a story together. I did it. He helped me through the story phase, especially, which is where that's 90% of the work. And, then I just knocked out a screenplay. I think it took me 3 days, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And I got into Bob Jane's office. I think he was the producer at the time on Spider-Man, and went in there, and I just took a shot at what I thought was a soft target. It wasn't that easy to do, but I just took a shot. And anyone who wants to do it, that's really all you can do. There's no established channel or a hallway where I can tell you to go down to the third door and hang a right and you'll sell a screenplay. You just have to use, a little creativity and, not necessarily tell the truth to the guard at the gate, and just do what you got to do.
Yeah, I have always found that aspect of any creative industry. I have found that aspect to be the most frustrating part. There is no one sort of pathway and requirement to do X, Y, and Z and you get a result. There's the sort of esoteric thing, much like you've described, of where, oh well, if you kind of shoot your shot and do this and that, and keep working and developing, and hopefully maybe along the way you'll get close or you'll achieve what you want to or whatever have you. It's not a linear path, and I've always found that incredibly frustrating.
It is frustrating, and again, what I described sounds really easy, and in relative to all the ways that it could have happened, it was easy. But I picked a target where I kind of knew of the people that were running it. It was Spider-Man, and I'd read those comic books as a kid. I did a story that was kind of straight down the middle, and I speculatively wrote an episode for TV. Nowadays, I wouldn't, if I were going back into it now, starting from scratch, I would not do it like that. I probably wouldn't have a shot. I probably would have been arrested. At Paramount, I think it was, but I would probably be arrested on a lot and laid out over the hood of a car. Nowadays, I don't know if it's the right thing to write an episode of a continuing series and go in and try to sell it to the producers. I don't think that market is as open as it used to be, because it used to be, it didn't matter who you were, how many legs you had, what color you were, how tall, short, didn't matter. If you had a completed script in your hand that they could go to camera with, you were solving a problem. And to you, to them, you looked like the solution to a problem. And that's the way it was presented to them. That's the way I sold the screenplay today, or teleplay rather. Today, I would write a movie. I wouldn't mess around with episodes. If I were trying to break into the business, I would do a film, full length feature screenplay rather than short format.
Which I think is odd, because all the creative energy right now is in television. The comic book movies have taken over film because all the money comes from China. And now all the really interesting creative stuff going on is all in television.
Well, yes. And what's taken the place of episodic TV as a channel for an emerging writer or a hopeful or wannabe writer are all the, I don't know, we used to call them B movies, but now they're direct to streaming and other outlets. You see stuff, for instance, on Netflix, a very, very creative, resourceful, low budget, contained production. I think the budgets for those films are probably far lower than some of the episodes that I've written for in the past. And I think those are the market, putting stuff together like that. I watched a show last night. I watched a movie that's not for everyone called I'm Thinking of Ending Things. And I still don't know what that movie's about. The resourceful part of it is that roughly half, maybe a little bit more, is shot in a car. It's two people in a vehicle. So you can knock that off in a couple of days, where if you're doing action, walking around, exteriors, anything like that, it would take you possibly weeks to cover the same time on air. And
Right.
I think those kind of, it's creative. A creative approach will help you. That's why you see a lot of movies and they're all the same. Someone stuck in a cabin, a basement, a caved in mine, reaching out for help or whatever. You're in one location for the most part, and it's an inexpensive way to do a film. And I think a new writer could hit that,
Yeah, there's a brilliant Tom Hardy film where the whole film is him driving around East London. And I think it's called The Commute or something like that. And the whole film is him in a car driving around East London, which is super simple to shoot because you can mount some GoPros on the dash and follow around in your buddy's chaser car, and boom, you've got a movie.
Yes. In television, in television, we used to call that a bottle show. There's other expressions for it, but let's say you're continuing lead, the actor, Chuck Norris or Michael Landon or whoever, they want to have a short week, maybe shoot 2 days or 3 days of a, 5 to 7 day schedule. You put them in a situation where they're in one location for most of that show. And that way you save money, you reduce your production schedule, you reduce the expense, and you reduce the load on your, primary actor. It was just a thing we did to either save money or to, fix a schedule. And there's a lot of great shows that come out of that.
No, I was chortling about ways that TV shows save on money. You and I talked over email about the show Yellowstone, and I just wrote a really long piece about it for the Cameron Journal. And one of the things I laughed about in watching the 4 seasons of the show is in the first season, they have this helicopter that they use a lot. And by season 2, there's no more helicopter. And I'm kind of like, the helicopter got cut from the production budget. How sad.
Well, as you might imagine,
they got tired of shelling out for the helicopter.
Yes, helicopters are very expensive. And that type of, the things they did in the first season of the show were extraordinarily resource intensive.
Yeah.
Later on, you see them spending a lot more time at the bar and in the country club and contained locations where they can do it on stage or at least do a number of pages in one place, and it saves everybody wear and tear.
Well, yeah, absolutely. Especially, and especially you can tell that someone wanted to rein in the budget on the show because seasons 2 through 4, most of it takes place in one of about 5 locations. There's the ranch, which is obviously a set that they have and can pretty much do whatever they want to because it's in the middle of Utah. There's a couple locations in town, and I think they shoot that in Ogden or something like that. couple locations in town, couple offices, the fancy club, and that's it. The whole show after season 2 takes place in maybe 5-6 locations.
Right.
That dive bar, a lot more stuff in the bunkhouse, a lot more stuff in the corral, or just a lot more stuff in nature, out in the great expanse of the West. And so
yes, with no traffic and no, you don't need security, and you don't. Yeah, it's wonderful.
Yes, just much less.
The most you'll see this too. Once I tell you, anyway, maybe you already have, but you'll see something happen. The most expensive word you can put in a screenplay is rain. The second most expensive word you can use is night. And so everything is either day or night. Doesn't matter. There's no mornings. There's no evenings. It's day or night to a production crew. Writing night increases. Night exterior creates expense. So you'll see the exterior shots start taking place outside in the day, and the nighttime scenes wind up going inside, where it can either be night or day when you're actually filming the show. So I've seen some of that on Yellowstone. I've seen it on other things too, where all of us, it's night inside, but outside it's day, because you've got the sun, you got free lights. Shooting at night is expensive. So,
and on all those, shows with the big companies, everybody's union wages go up at night. It just blows the budget out of control. They had that problem with Mr. Robot. Mr. Robot most of the show happens at night, sort of thing. And they're shooting in New York City with blocked off streets, at all times of the day and night. And I can only imagine what what a production nightmare and budget nightmare it was to make that show happen.
As a writer, I see dollar signs. I can't help it. Yeah, because I've worked on staff on a number of shows, and they'd hand me 12 pages and say, "We need you to take $30,000 out of this."
Yeah.
Okay. And so when I'm watching television, I can't help it. I can see I see night, rain, action, sliding cars, stuff like that with no cheats. And I know that they've spent half their budget on that, maybe 4 to 8 pages of script, which makes them have to cover for other, throughout the rest of the show. But that stuff where you're walking around at night doing it's not for nothing. It's expensive.
No, and that was like in on Mr. Robot in season 4. There's 2.5 episodes that take place entirely in a library, and I think that's where Sam Esmail made up his budget, because the first part of that season is very expensive, and I think that was where they made up the money, was by doing 2.5 episodes entirely in the library.
This is probably before your time somewhat, and I'm dating myself somewhat, but there was a movie that was done, brilliant script, 2 brilliant actors, called My Dinner with Andre. Now, was it the best movie ever made? No. Was it good? Hell yeah. It was really good.
My Dinner with Andre is an amazing film. Absolutely.
But it was 2 guys sitting at a table. So you don't have 40 feet of dolly shot, where you're rolling the camera on rails. You don't have drone footage. You don't have day, night, nothing. You set up the lights and you got a camera, and most of it's on lockdown, which means you're not panning or moving the camera around, and you shoot it for $1. So if the screenplay is good, you can still come up with a product without, going nuts. Everything's changed, in the last 10 years or so. Computer generated effects have become somewhat affordable. So you'll see a lot more, you look at something like Sharknado and that series of things they did for Sci-Fi Network. They have huge effects. If I write, 1 million sharks in a spinning wind, 200 miles an hour, and all that stuff, back in the day, they're going to be saying, well, where do we get a shark wrangler and how many fans does that take? Now you can get a guy maybe in a foreign country to whip you up a tornado with some sharks, and that's a nice resource. I haven't done anything.
There's whole animation factories in South Korea. That's all they do is they hire 100 dudes to draw and make these effects. Most of the big animated shows are storyboarded here, and the actual animation is all done in these animation factories in South Korea. Archer,
likewise,
Simpsons, Family Guy, all of those, it's all done in South Korea.
Yeah, those are some good shows. I've never written an animated piece, and I'd actually love to. But the CGI, the same thing. You see some incredible effects that only a few years ago not only would have been impossible, they would have been extraordinarily expensive. You would have had to invent the technology the same way they did for Matrix and what's the Avatar? Some of these movies represented a sea change as far as technology goes. And, now it's not as expensive, but it used to be impossible.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I remember watching the DVD extras on Titanic, and they had built this scale model. And when they filmed the sinking, they had one chance to do it because they couldn't afford to build a second model. So they literally had to get it right because they had one chance to break the ship in half. So it absolutely 110% had to be right. And nowadays we would just CGI that in South Korea. It's fine.
Right, and it would look good.
Fine.
You have different grades of effects. I've not done a CGI intensive show. I did a film in 2012 that had a lot of CGI, a lot of green screen, and we had a limited budget, but we did some pretty spectacular stuff. For what equates to no money, really, in today's scheme of things.
Yeah.
But, and now you don't even need a soundstage. The last 3 shows that I was staff on were shot in warehouses because the technology with the microphones, the sound recording, the filtering, the mastering, the digital everything, it allows you to, you get away with murder. In the old days, and I'm including my career, we had to have sound stages with, 3-foot walls, and you couldn't have any change in your pocket or anything. It was all very sensitive and tender and expensive. And, I'm glad I lived through that because I can relate to, what it took to make films back in the 30s and 40s and 50s and 60s even. It took a lot more, but now we have better resources, better equipment, better technology. So, some things get cheaper, but some things get more expensive. Good talent's always expensive. You can't do anything about that.
It's kind of, to that idea, and I want to use this as a bridge to talk about some of the shows that you've worked on. And to that, it's like I feel like as amazing as our modern crop of talent is, we just don't have a Greta Garbo and a Joan Crawford or a Judy Garland or, Olivia de Havilland. There was something magical about the 30s and 40s that produced a very specific group of talents that today's crop just cannot keep up.
I don't know if I agree with you. And I think that there may be more talent out there and trained talent and hungry talent, but the field is somewhat more diluted, meaning that there's a lot of people who can do incredible things. They're just spread kind of thin. Back in the day, they had a handful of actresses that carried roles, and the cream obviously rose. You wound up with people like Katharine Hepburn and Betty Davis and, these people that had these decades-long careers under contract with studios usually, and they just made movies over and over and over and over, and they got better and better and better as well. Greta Garbo and all these people, but I don't know. I don't know. I think there's some really talented people out there that they don't rise to that stature in a way, because we're in a time of manufactured celebrity, and some people are looking for different things than they used to be. I don't know. There's some really talented people out there.
I mean, yes. I mean, to that point, I do find it a privilege to be on the planet at the same time as someone like Meryl Streep. We will not see another Meryl Streep for a century, at least. It's really cool to be on the planet at the same time as someone like that, who's still working, who's still active, and who's still making amazing, amazing movies. I think it's really, one of my favorite scenes that I like to rewatch randomly is from a movie she did with Philip Seymour Hoffman, who I also loved, called Doubt.
Fantastic.
Yes, and Viola Davis won Best Supporting Actress for a 7-minute scene in the middle of the movie that I just rewatch. And
yes.
Roger Ebert was absolutely on it when he said it would be a crime if the Academy does not nominate Viola Davis, because she just went up against the greatest actress of her generation and put in an amazing, great performance. And no one really knew who Viola Davis was at that time. And it was just so amazing. And it's cool to be on the planet while these people are here and can do this,
You're talking about an incredibly skilled actress too. Viola Davis is she's incredible.
Yeah.
And so I don't know. Yeah. Seeing her earlier on in her career as kind of a pop-up, it's intense. I don't know. I love those kind of moments. I love those kind of films. But she's really solid. But I don't know. I think about people like, I'm not in casting. I don't pick the actresses or the actors or whatever, but there's some recent actresses that when you talk about Greta Garbo or Betty Davis or whatever, that if they can manage to hang on, past the phase where they started. I think of Jennifer Lawrence in particular. She started off with a really good movie, Winter's Bone, and some stuff that was kind of outside the mainstream. And then she winds up with a huge franchise, Hunger Games and all that stuff. If she can get past that and past getting worked, and talked into the wrong choices, et cetera, she could be like a Betty Davis or whatever, look at it 20 years from now. She could still be doing stuff like that. Meryl Streep's hard to compare anybody because she's so adaptable and so good and so strong. I think I just watched her in something. Anyway, it's hard to compare people to people like that, that she's awfully good.
Yeah.
But
she's had a new movie out on HBO Max called Let Them All Talk, which I have not had a chance to see yet, and I want to. I might need to spring for an HBO Max subscription, is the moral of the story. But yeah,
I had to give up, and finally, I finally did that. Like, I feel I need to subscribe to one more damn thing. I just saw Meryl Streep in The Prom, which is
with James Corden. I've heard that's good.
Yeah, it's good. It's not going to be for everybody, and it's I think a few years too late to be meaningful. But it was entertaining to me, and Meryl Streep's playing a completely offbeat, out of the norm, thing, and she was really, really strong, and it's the strength of the people in it carry it okay. It's not, right down my pipe of something I'd seek out to watch, but God, she was good. So
yeah,
I don't know, but talent costs money.
It definitely does. Speaking of all that, I would like for you to give us a little behind the scenes of how you ended up writing on Walker, Texas Ranger, which was my grandma's absolute favorite show back in the 90s. You did not talk when her show was on. And it was Walker, Texas Ranger and Touched by an Angel back to back, and don't talk to her while those shows were on. Fill us
Oh
in.
yeah.
How did you end up writing on Walker Texas Ranger and working with Chuck Norris? How did that happen?
That happened at a strange time in my life because I just moved and I wasn't comfortable and I wasn't employed and I was kind of looking around at what the next thing was going to be. And my agent called me. How often does that happen? I started a diary just so I could write down that day my agent called me. And he said, "Hey, do you have any interest in writing a Walker Texas Ranger?" And I said, "Hell yes." And I'd been trying to get on that show or get a meeting with somebody for, 7 years or something to work on it. Cause it was one of the last kind of old school, well-structured, every episode stands alone, kind of old fashioned TV. And I was obviously pretty well trained in that. And, it's kind of a, almost a Western, as close as you could get. It's got Chuck Norris in it. And so I said, yeah, I'd love to do that. So I gathered myself up, went in for a meeting. And in the meeting was one of my writing heroes of all time, a guy named Gordon Dawson. He wrote Bring Me the Head of Alfredo Garcia, among other things. And I knew who he was. And I was kind of starstruck because he's, got a serious writing muscle. And I sat down with these couple of guys and they asked me to write a story, or they had a story for a 4-part episode. And they asked me to write the script. And so I did. And that was my audition. They hired me on as story editor or executive story consultant or one of those things. And they wound up sending me to Dallas. And I went to Dallas for, quote, 3 weeks. And I've never been home since then. But it changed my life. The whole thing changed my life, the whole experience. But it was a nice thing. CBS, little studio. We weren't even on the lot at Radford and Ventura Boulevard. We were just in a little building next to CBS, and had a lot of writers. And not every writer that starts off the season is going to wind up staying, the 22 weeks or however long it takes to complete the season. And fortunately, I was one of the ones that remained, and I did the whole final season of Walker. And I wrote, I think 3 episodes and touched about every episode that was on that season. I loved it, but that was one of those rare things where my agent called and said, "Hey, would you like to do this?" And I said, yeah. So that wasn't as hard as some of the other gigs I've gotten.
Yeah.
I wish I'd been on the show years before. They had a pretty heavy turnover of staff, but I felt like it was a home there. I really had a nice time, and I enjoyed every minute of it. And
why do you think they burnt through writers so fast?
I don't know if it was so fast, but you figure it was on the air for 8 years. They, seasonally writers turn over. You don't. By somebody's wishes, you either don't stay with the writers because you want to go a different direction, or you want to grow, or you want to reduce cost, or whatever it is. You get an added producer and they've got their own friends that they want to get employed, and, whatever. It happens. I've never been on a show for 2 seasons in a row. So it's pretty normal.
Yeah, I guess that nature of
on staff anyway. Yeah, I've written on shows multiple seasons, but not worked on staff, for more than a year. So a season is typically, I don't know, 22 episodes. So with pre-production and some people hanging out for post-production and doing, the dialogue, you have to go back and insert inevitably into shows. I love working staff. I don't know. Nowadays the guys who you look at these series that pop up, and it'll be 1 or 2 guys who write, or people who write all of the episodes. So there's not that kind of wide open, interview process like they used to have. I used to go and talk to, people on all kinds of shows. And it was a lot more open than it is now. I think the market's really it's tightened up as far as employment goes. So if someone's trying to get into writing, you have to pick your target, and episodic TV may or may not be that target anymore.
I also find much how in film they really love writer-directors. I find TV is starting to go in that direction where you have people who, it's one or two guys and they're writing and directing it together and they're doing all the episodes. And it's like one person's creative vision. The age of the writer room is on its way out, to kind of reinforce your point. Like,
I think you're right.
6 dudes in a room.
Yes. Now you still have those people, but they're not getting credit. They're not getting screen credit. You still have those people on staff writers and so forth, but they don't secure the contracts to get your name on the episode. So it kind of shuts out a lot of people. In a way, I hate that, because it used to be the way that writers would break in. They'd go into Twilight Zone or Star Trek or whatever, or Bonanza, which is the way my father broke into the business. He accosted one of the producers on Bonanza way back in the 60s. But they just you don't have that nowadays. You just don't have it. And it's sad, because it limits what people can do. On the other hand, if I were writing for TV right now, I would probably be writing a pilot, an original series. Because the guys that get those jobs, they wind up writing a lot of shows. Seasons are shorter than they used to be. If you look at something like, an example, American Gods or Stranger Things, that the seasons are like 10 episodes or 8 episodes or 12 episodes. They're not doing 22.
When you take out commercial breaks, I mean, part of the reason network shows were so long is because an hour of television is really only 42 minutes, a half hour is only 23. On streaming, you don't have ad breaks, so you don't need 22 episodes to tell the whole story. You need 10 or 12. So
right, and the episodes are of let's see, American Gods is a good example. That you'll see one episode, it'll be 74 minutes, and one episode will be 52 minutes or whatever. So they're kind of not bound by the same restrictions that we used to, the commercial breaks and all that. And now they're in TV, in stuff that actually makes it to network series that are on the air. They've got a lot of commercials, man.
They do.
I think that's gotten a little much. It's hard to even maintain your focus. We used to have fixed breaks. We knew when they would, what we had to have in that show as far as structure to keep people watching through the commercial and to come back with some kind of continuity. And that used to be the reason that people didn't flip around and change stations. They'd invested enough time to be, become acquainted with the guest stars and the flow of the story. And so you have your first commercial break. It's kind of short. You come back, you do the second act. You do something at the end of the second act that makes them want to come back after they visit the kitchen or the restroom. And, they go on and watch the conclusion and the third act twist and the big finish and what's coming next week. And that you just wanted to keep people, on the couch on one channel, and fill the space between commercials with something worth watching. And they still try to do that. But man, if you watch some of the Bravo or some of these shows, they become quote reality, unquote, end to end 24/7. Some of the commercial breaks are massive on Discovery Channel and History Channel. I wouldn't even try. I'm too busy fast forwarding through the recorded version to count it out. But man, last night I was watching something about fighting robots or something. They had like a 10-minute commercial break. So you really.
Oh no, I've seen some. I mean, when I sold ads, I worked in TV from the other side. I was doing advertising on the ad side, and there were times where I've seen 4.5 minute commercial breaks, which is an eternity in television time. You know.
Oh yeah.
I've seen. I was sitting in a hotel room somewhere, and there was one. It was literally like a 6 minute long commercial break, and it was just absolutely insane. And of course, I'm channel surfing sort of thing, because I'm not going to sit there and watch stupid ads for 6 minutes. Hell no. Like I'm flipping around and being kind of like, oh my god, this is the longest commercial break. And I sat there and calculated, and it was 6 minutes long, which was just weird. But
that's brutal.
Yeah, I mean that gets into the economics of the problem with the economics of cable and over-the-air TV is not what it was, because streaming has eaten a big chunk out of that pie, and so it's a different.
And I remember when that used to be. I remember when that used to be a theory that could happen. And even people who thought like that were considered a little bit out there. That you could possibly have programming on demand.
Yeah,
that's wacky.
Yeah,
but
no, yeah, it's been interesting. Part of the weird thing about being my age is it is interesting to watch so much of the stuff that we were told as children would one day happen come into reality. Like it's just so weird to be like, oh yeah, when I was 10, one of these days we thought we'd have TV on demand, and back then that was so crazy because cable was considered sophisticated technology, and now here we are, like computers in your pocket, we have it, like all of these things, like in my lifetime, like it's like I own an iPhone and grew up with a rotary dial phone. Like it's very weird to be like in your 30s millennial, because you're old enough to remember how things used to be, but you're living like kind of in the future. It's very strange. It's very strange.
I'm not sure a child would know how to operate a rotary dial telephone.
No, I'm guarantee you they wouldn't. Anyone under
look at it as
30, really.
Yeah, they'd look at it as an injury hazard,
Yeah. I mean, like anyone under 30 just would not know what to do. But conversely, I find it entertaining because I called my mom and I said, why do old telephone numbers have words in them when touch tone dialing phones didn't exist? And she's like, well, here's the problem. You used to have to call the operator and have the name of the location for the part of town and then the number of the place you wanted to call. And I'm kind of like, you can't be serious. She's like, no, my mother's 64, she's 65. She's like, no, I remember when dialing phones came in when I was a kid. You used to have to talk to an operator to call anybody. And it's like, it was very annoying because she grew up on a farm in Colorado. And she's like, we had a party line as well. It was very interesting. It's just an odd sort of thing to just as technology has changed so much.
Well, you're seeing, you're seeing something happen right now. It's just open war. You're talking about cable, and literally the word cable, and imagine all that stuff coming through your cable, which I have at my household.
Right.
That medium, that hardware, that whole way of funneling data is going to be gone.
Yeah.
Like really, really fast. And they're fighting it out with all the force and this is a war because there's so much money involved and there's so many industries involved that cross over with each other. And we're seeing the war now. If you have cable, they're asking you to sign up for HBO Max. And if you're watching Discovery Channel, they're asking you to get Discovery Plus. And if you're watching Fox News, there's another whole Fox channel with all the cool programming you're not getting if you're watching just Fox News. And you have to buy that. Well, carrying cable and all those other subscription packages. Nobody, I mean, I guess some people can, but it's not practical for a household to have a $500 entertainment budget every month, for just television.
And that's why
one of them will have to
cable.
fall.
I haven't had a cable subscription in 10 years, literally in 10 years.
I have a relative, an in-law that does not have cable right now. And his bills monthly are at least what I'm paying for cable.
Yeah.
With all of his subscriptions to, Amazon Prime and Netflix and Hulu and Roku and whatever. All the things that I maybe get for a little while and I don't get them for a while. And, they come in and out of favor with the cable company. I have Comcast.
Yeah.
I see them or I don't, but I'm not going to keep buying extra stuff on top of, because the programming that they're, especially 2020, man, come on. The programming they're managing to slip in and get a lot of buzz about is not suitable. It's not even finished. It's like something that wasn't quite cooked all the way. And I've watched more bad movies in 2020 than I think I probably saw the rest of my life combined.
I mean, I think we're going through a phase like what happened in the 1930s. So back in the 30s, Republic Pictures, they were making a movie a week. And that was back in the day on film, cutting by hand with a razor. Like editing was a dude with a razor cutting the film together.
Yes.
And sound was still cutting edge technology. And I feel like we're going through that sort of phase where it's quantity, not quality. Just pump them out as fast as you can, sort of thing.
And look at, and you know this better than I do, but the competition is also TikTok and Spotify and Pandora and all of the, all these other things vying for your time. Except like Spotify, you can make a little video for, 5-minute video and get 300 million people watch it, and you've made more money than you're going to make off a cheap horror movie that makes it to Netflix. It's a lot of competition.
No, I mean, even as, as someone who used to do a YouTube talk show and all this type of thing, yeah, I mean, you're competing with, millions of other creators to get people's attention. And that's why even with something like this podcast, there are tens of thousands of podcasts. And I'm privileged that a few people listen to mine, sort of thing. And thousands of people used to watch the Cameron Callan show. And we're privileged that thousands of people come by to read my work on my blog every week. It is a whole new ecosystem. It's a whole new open environment. But I feel like consolidation is coming. I don't know.
It's a great opportunity. Oh yeah, I do. I see that coming and then exploding again. I mean, it goes it's like peristalsis. Things change and they contract and then they blow up. Right now, there's incredible opportunity. Like we're talking about breaking into writing. Well, I had to go to a network show. I had to find somebody with a series, and I wrote it up ahead of time. Who does that? Because without doing that, I had no shot at all. And I happened to hit them at a weak moment, and they were looking at maybe a preemption and a script that was late from another writer, and I had one in my hand. So it's worth the guy flipping to the beginning, flipping to the end of the second act, checking out the third act twist, maybe looking at my ending, and then looking up and saying, "Who's your agent?" Which is exactly what happened. And I said, "I don't know, who's your agent?" And he told me. I said, "Well, that's my agent too, man. Call him." And so he called the guy, and the guy said, "Okay, here's the deal. I get 10% and I'll be your agent." I'm like, "Okay, cool." And that was, nice and clean and old school. Now, if you're a writer, you got so many channels, so many things to go after. Maybe it's not, old school network television, where I still actually wish I were doing that right now. I mean, I like that kind of work. I like the structure of it. I like the regularity and you have the same crew at least every other week, or every show. Only new people are directors and actors, and you're writing, you're talking about a lot of written by and directed by, written and directed, and then sometimes written, directed, and produced. More power to those people, but you don't necessarily get the best product because no one has any, no one's got oversight.
The classic example of that I talk about is with Tyler Perry, who does a lot of written, directed, produced. And it's nice, like, as a Black person, to see wonderful Black content being produced. But I also look at it as, one, by doing it all yourself, you're robbing other Black creators like myself of an opportunity to write movies and make TV and all that sort of thing. And for two, there's no one to tell you your ideas are not great. Or to fix problems in the story or things that are just not plausible. Like, there's no other person to be kind of like, but bro, that don't hit.
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
there's just no.
I can see that. I can see that.
Ways.
Yeah. There's been, especially lately. 2020 was like, if you're talking about Black film in particular, was prolific. I can't imagine there was a Black person in entertainment who wasn't working in 2020. Maybe there was, but some award season, which it happens to be right now, the WGA, and then they'll have the Academy Awards and all that. The nominations, it looks like 2 or 3 people were able to slip in a other than Black film, because it was quite a I don't know. It's like the dam broke. It looks like everybody's working. I don't think they're worried about Tyler Perry, but yeah, I can see that.
Certainly not. Yeah.
But there's just, if you write and produce a movie, whether you're whoever you are, they look back at the age of the auteur films, Truffaut and different guys, and they'd write these great films and direct them and all of that. Nowadays, I think you owe it to yourself as a creative person to have somebody at least able to tell you, that one thing is not, because it doesn't quite work, or you could easily cut 20 minutes out of that. It happens when you get a big star and they produce their own movie. Sometimes it can work out okay, but there's nobody willing to put their job on the line to tell them, hey, we might want to go a different way, or, you could cut, a lot out of this thing, make it a little bit tighter or whatever. They don't want to do that, and I don't blame them, because they got a house payment, Yeah, no, but it doesn't serve the final product, really. Tyler Perry is going to be it's going to be a Tyler Perry product no matter what, because that's a kind of a unique situation. That's a factory, I don't know. More power to him too, man. It's good to be working.
No, absolutely. That was absolutely. Speaking of old school TV and all that type of thing, can you tell us a little bit about how your father broke into screenwriting? Because it's very interesting to have a father and son in the same business.
Yeah, I don't think it's that odd in other industries. Like here in Texas, a lot of people.
Business, though. It is odd in media to have that. So it'd be interesting to hear about how he got into it and why.
It was interesting. And he was a very young guy. We lived in a very small town in Indiana. He was a dentist at a very young age with 3 kids, including a babe in arms. And I was about as tall as a desk. And he didn't like it. He had just borrowed a bunch of money, built a dental practice in a community, introduced himself to the community. He was the young dentist that everybody was looking forward to go getting their teeth filled. And he wasn't happy. And so we were sitting, my dad and I were sitting watching TV one day, and I'm at an age, I was 5 years old, where I think the stuff on the TV is real. I don't understand that there's not a puppeteer or someone standing behind the I don't quite get what it is. And everything is like a documentary because they can't tell you, oh, these are actors performing. I don't know. Yeah, I didn't quite get it. And we watched an episode of Bonanza, an old episode. And, the burning, map of the Ponderosa on fire. And, then the commercial is see the USA in your Chevrolet. And my dad says to me in the basement of this little house in Indiana, he goes, you know what I want to do? I'm like, no, Dad, what? He goes, I think I'm going to go to Hollywood and write these bonanzas. And I'm like, yeah, you should do that. Trying to wrap my head around what that could possibly mean. Because I didn't know I didn't know these people had a script and they were actors and there was a director with a camera. I didn't understand that. And within days, the three kids and my mom were in the car headed to California. And this is from a house where we had just settled in there. We had moved around. I was born in Indianapolis. I had a sister born in Texas when my dad was in the Air Force. And then another little sister born in Batesville, Indiana, shortly before this happened. And we were all piled in an Oldsmobile headed to California. And my dad was going to follow shortly after. At exactly the same time as the Cuban Missile Crisis, and the guy he was going to sell his dental practice to couldn't get his money out of the bank, and the country was kind of scared, and nuclear apocalypse was going to be on everybody. And so it took him a couple of months to get his act together and actually come out and meet us. We moved to Hollywood. He took a night class in screenwriting at Hollywood High School and started writing stories for Bonanza. And he found out who one of the producers was, a writer named John Hawkins, one of the best television writers in the history of television. He found out who this guy was. He found out that he was the first guy on the lot every morning. And he went and, like I said, he accosted him at the gate. I think that was at Paramount, and said, "You're John Hawkins?" And he's like, "Yeah." And John wasn't a warm guy to strangers. He was really nice, but he wasn't one of those guys that just opens up to you. And he said, "Well, I got a story for you." He goes, "No, it's in your agent." "Well, I don't have an agent. And I got to get to my dental practice." And he's like, "You're a dentist?" He's like, "Yeah." He goes, "Well, stick to that. Don't bother me, whatever." And he threw the story in the car. And the next day met John at the gate, because John used to go to work at like 6:00 in the morning. He met John at the gate, and John said, "Oh, God damn it. What the hell are you doing, Doc?" And he handed back that story with notes. And my dad went and wrote another story, or rewrote that story, and did this over a period of weeks. And he and John started, meeting at the gate. It was like a ritual. And one day he said to my dad, he said, "You got a lot of appointments today?" My dad's like, "Well, I know I could take a day off, I guess." He goes, "Oh, I want you to come up to the office." My dad called his assistant and canceled his patients for the day, and went up there and sold his first Bonanza. And that's what he did. He just said he was going to do it, and he did it. And he was in his, 20s, and he was just like all these eager kids out doing the millions of things that they do, electric cars, internet stuff, cannabis industry, whatever it is. He was just a young guy with a lot of balls and no real knowledge of the obstacles. And if you had shown him all the obstacles, he probably wouldn't have cared either. And
I was like that. I miss those days.
I was like that this morning, but as the day goes on, you get tired. But yeah, I don't know. It's so scary to think about that he was younger than my youngest son when he decided to throw away a medical education, basically, and go to LA and write TV shows. That's pretty bold. And it's a great example, for people to just, if you want to do something, just go do it, because there's really not that much stopping you. You probably have you've built a bigger monster in your way than you'll ever encounter once you're headed that direction. And
no, I definitely I suffered from that in my 20s as well. When I executive produced Denver Fashion Week, it had never been done before. There had been 3 previous attempts, and they were all horrible failures. And one of the things that people told me when I said I was going to do Denver Fashion Week is someone said, well, it's been failed so many times. We don't think you can do it, but if you do it, make sure it's good, sort of thing.
Right.
And we did 5 venues, 45 models, and 25 designers in 7 days. And now it's the biggest fashion event in the West. And it's gotten bought and sold a couple times, and now it's in the hands of a great team who does it, and it's tremendous. But before we did it in 2012, and I had a great team behind me, not a solo act, had a great team. It had never been done before. A lot of people thought it couldn't be done. And I didn't know, to some degree, it was good that I didn't know how hard it was going to be. And it's one of those things where I wouldn't do it now. If someone came to me and said, oh, you should do Denver Fashion Week again, I'd be kind of like, oh, hell no.
No, that sounds incredibly scary. That sounds really, really scary and requiring organizational skills I do not possess. It's frightening.
No easy thing to take 45 young women and turn them into models in 6 weeks. And we did not have any backbiting. We did not have any gossip. We did not have any drama. I was surrounded by the most magical team of people. Like, the girls all became friends. They were giving each other rides. Many of them are still friends, and that was almost 10 years ago. They're all still friends, and they've all gone and gotten married. They've been bridesmaids for each other. It's just wonderful, just like sorority of these amazing women. It was very difficult, and it was one of those things where I thought of how it could be done. I saw how it could be accomplished, and I just kind of went for it, sort of thing.
You have to with anything. Who's gonna come along and if they knew how to do it? No one's going to come along and tell you how to, or that it's easy, or that it's possible, or anything else ever on anything. If they knew how to do it, especially profitably, they would do it. That's where a lot of books on screenwriting fall down in my mind. Because I'm thinking if they could write well enough to teach someone else how to write, they're going to make more. They should be writing something, but they'd rather tell somebody else how to do it half-assed. There's nobody to tell them that's not how to do it. So I don't know. Maybe I should write a screenwriting book. I don't know.
I find that it is very rare to find someone, at least in the book business, it's very rare to find someone who writes well and also teaches well. Those things do not usually go together.
I've tried to teach. I mean, I've stood in for, and I've done seminars for other people that were teaching screenwriting, and it's not for me. I mean, that's the kind of stand-up I can't do. Now, my dad taught a screenwriting class at one point. That's a whole nother story. And people in his class, I think a couple of them are still working in television and film. People sold. 4 people in his class, I think, sold material. It was like a real down. He sat there with the very guy that he sold his first show to, John Hawkins. He and John did a seminar at Cal State Fullerton, which I used to attend and take notes, just to get what I got out of that. And they would do mock meetings and what a story meeting was like. And they both produced, they'd both been hired. They'd both hired people. It was invaluable. It was an absolutely beautiful convergence of events for the people that were in that class. It was like really cool. It was really good for me too. I learned a lot, watching these two guys, because pitching is hard. It's hard to go before someone you don't know and throw stories at them. And you never know what's going to happen.
Oh, I remember the first time I was pitching books, and it was when you go to a pitch conference as a writer, it's usually a 90-minute session. There's a set number of people in that pitch session, and you have all the agents and editors sitting at one table, and then you stand in line to see them, and you get 3 minutes. So every time,
Jeez.
So it's like a 3-minute cycle. So you stand in line when you want to see someone, and then however many people back, that's how many cycles it will take you to get up for it to be your turn. So in an hour and a half, you might be able to see 3 or 4 people. So you have to be targeted. You have to know who you want to talk to, and then do your best to get to as many. You kind of have to have the A team and the B team. Like, what are the top 2 people you absolutely must talk to? And then if you have time, who's in pole position. And so I didn't necessarily understand that the first time I went in, so I thought it was just going to be open season. So there I am, standing in line, waiting for the bell to go up, waiting to go up to the sort of thing. And you get 3 minutes to sit down and basically be like, "Hi, my name is Cameron Cow, and I'm here to show you a Plains Girl, which is about 3 generations of women in eastern Colorado stuck on a rural farm and their desperate attempts to escape a stultifying life for something more." and if that pitch sounds compelling, then you have 2 more minutes to talk about it. If that pitch doesn't sound compelling, then they're going to sit there and wait for the next person for 2.5 minutes. And that's just how it goes. And it was incredibly hard. It was incredibly nerve-wracking. I thought querying over email was shitty until I did that.
Right. No,
a pitch much worse.
A pitch is a really intimidating, scary thing. And you asked about Walker earlier. I was very nervous about that because my life was changing. Everything was up in the air for me. And I thought, I could use a good job right about now. And so there was a lot riding on it. And somewhere between the car and the building, I ceased to give a shit. I thought, you know what, this isn't going to go anywhere. I'm going to go in here and have fun. I'm going to meet some people. And what it turned into was something great. I mean, I was sitting there with a couple of great writers. They did stuff the old fashioned way, zero bullshit. And they were looking for somebody who maybe had, some muscle under pressure, which I definitely do. And it was like meeting some guys and you form a gang. I mean, I want to be in the gang with those guys. It was really great. It was just a lot of writing power in one room. And, to meet like one of my writing heroes, who wrote for Sam Peckinpah, it was like a big deal for me. And I just had a really good time, and I said, look, you guys want to know if I can do it or not? Give me a piece to write. Give me something to write. And I'll do it. If you want me to pitch stories, I'll do it. But you know where I've been, who I've worked with, I think I can pull this off. And I just, they gave me the assignment just to write a script, and I knocked it off as fast as I possibly could and gave them the most polished product I possibly could. And I got the gig, and it was really great. But it wasn't like what you just described, which sounds absolutely frightening. It's enough to keep me from doing it. So.
I mean, it is disconcerting when you sit down with an agent and you pitch just like I did. That's my pitch. I've practiced it a lot. And you sit down with an agent and someone says that sounds like August Osage County with Meryl Streep and Julia Roberts, and I'm not interested. Right. And that's the end of the conversation. You get up and leave. But then at that same conference, here's how the coin can turn. At that same conference, I sat down with someone who actually, her office is in eastern Colorado, and she's like, "Oh, I'm very interested." And she didn't end up representing the project, which sucked. But it was kind of an amazing sort of thing to be kind of like, oh, but for her, like, this is about my home, sort of thing. This is local to me, and so she was very interested. And we had the full 3-minute conversation. We were literally talking as I was walking away, and then we corresponded the months after and all that sort of thing. It's a very odd the book business is brutal. I don't recommend. Your
No,
business sounds nicer.
I've
Maybe I need to
never
start writing for television.
I've never been tempted. I've written, pieces of things. I've never been tempted to try to do that. It used to be, if you wanted to sell a paperback or whatever, it wasn't that hard to do it. Back in the old days, it wasn't that hard to sell a book. It was hard to make any money off of it. And if you look at the time and the page count and the labor and compare that to, knocking off 60 pages for an episode of TV, there was really no comparison money wise. If the mercenary in me wouldn't let me do it, because I wanted to make some money. I wanted, my first sale, I bought like a motorcycle and a stereo and a case of beer. I was like, I needed that stuff.
That's my biggest complaint about the book business is the economics of it all. In fact, I just had this argument. I just started my MFA in creative writing at Goddard College, and I just had this argument with my advisor for this semester, who used to be a story executive at Disney. She did sequels and direct-to-video stuff and all that sort of thing. And she has 9 books out and just won a book award. And I said, that my biggest complaint about this industry is that there's really no money in it. And we had a whole conversation about, the publishing business and how for the vast majority of people now, it's not even like, oh, you have the elite writers who sell millions of copies and make money to match. Then you have the mid-list writers who sort of do okay. And then you have the bottom of the list writers who are scraping by. Now it's literally there's the top 10% that make all the money and everybody else just doesn't. Like the vast majority of people who produce books, even books that sell well, don't really make any money at it. And
and it's unfortunate, but that's that was the fact back in the 70s.
Yeah.
That was the thing.
I feel kind of stupid for devoting my life to something that
you can't
make any money. Like it's me, I think.
It doesn't matter. It's like we're talking about a guy making a 5-minute video or a TikToker where 90 seconds or whatever, and they're millionaires. If the money, I don't know, it happens. If you do it and you do it enough times and you do it well enough, sooner or later you're going to make money at it. But there's an experience involved as well. I mean, I couldn't have written. I look at my own credits, and it's a third of the material I've written. There's a lot of stuff where I either didn't get credit, in arbitration or by agreement, or I wrote teleplays that weren't produced, or the series were canceled, or a million other things. So I only get to see my credited works on like IMDb, but I was just thinking about meetings that I took on various shows, like what I did right after my first episode. I got a gig on Rockford Files, and the episode was never shot. And but I still wrote it. I still had some good meetings, had some fun. Hunter was a really popular series at one time. That was one of the coolest meetings I ever had. I pitched the guy 5 incredible stories, and they were either doing them, or they'd already done them, or they were fixing to do them. And as I'm walking out the door, I threw him a one-liner that was a joke, and they bought the story. You're talking about like those pitches that I pitched. The guy said, "You're all over it. You're all around it. You got the target, man. What else you got?" I said, "I got nothing else." And as I'm walking out the door, I said, "Hey, wait, Mingala comes to LA for a liver transplant." And I thought he would get a laugh out of that. And instead I got a contract. And I had to write that bitch too. But they never shot it. That one wasn't shot. That was for a great group of guys. And I wish I'd done a lot more work with them, with Stephen Cannell and who was the guy in the meeting, Frank Lupo. I met some great people in the industry. I've really had a good time. I don't remember really that many bad days even, I don't know. I like it. I like doing it. I like the people. I like the process. I don't like being on the third page of Act One. That's kind of a lonely deal. But the rest of it is all, it's all fun. And I'd rather, I don't want to do something else if I can help it. I've done a lot of other things, but I like writing, and it's a good way to get by. You have to write, like you're saying, you don't make enough money off a book, but there's something in you that's like, yeah, I kind of have to write this book. Well, what are you going to do? Not do it? You still have to take a shot. So I don't know.
My problem, my difficulty, my difficulty is that somehow life keeps steering me back to writing, even though I probably would have left it behind a while ago.
Right.
It's stressful, it's long, it's, especially like people in my
back in.
Yeah, it's like people in my graduate program, this is their passion, this is their raison d'etre. This is what they do. And I haven't felt that way about writing. If I ever felt that way, it has been a long time. If I ever felt that way.
Look, I don't know, man. I've been pretty dark about the whole thing a couple of times. And I had given it up entirely, around 2012, actually, was when I had decided, okay, I'm not doing any more of that. It's too lonely. It's too antisocial, and I'm just not doing it. And then, of course, about that time, I get a call from a guy that I've done, 20 plus hours of television for or with, and he asked me to write like a movie, or, they'd already had a draft of it and he wanted somebody to come through and rewrite it and polish it. And I said, I can't do it. I've decided not to do that. And, he expressed that he had a need that was greater than my desire not to write. So I don't know. I had to go for it. And so, I popped off a movie, and I don't know, every time I think I'm done with all of that, something else pulls me in. Recently it was sorting through all my dad's manuscripts and all of his old teleplays. And it was a mass of material, and all the unpublished material that he had invested a great deal of time in for no reward, no return. And some of it is great. And, you talk about, you do it, you don't get so much back. I don't know. I looked at my dad's stuff, and he's got maybe thousands of pages of that. And if nobody else ever reads it but me, it was worth doing, because it really stirred me up. And I really want to get, I'm going to take another shot at it, but I'll go after a feature, because the market's open for features. I don't know how to get on a series anymore. I don't really know what you have to do or who you have to know. But
I don't think you have to do anything these days. I would call up a streaming service of your choice. And pitch yourself. Because, there's all these new services, and they need so much content that literally, I think it's these days, especially if you have the type of background you do, that's literally a show up, and they'll put you to work on something. I mean, literally, I think, especially for someone in your position who doesn't, you've already well broken in and bought real estate, I think literally you can just show up at Netflix and they'll be kind of like, oh, sure, yeah, Stranger Things is down the hall and to the left. Just walk in there and see how that feels. Like that. There's a couple more, so just keep going down the hall till you find a fit, and then call HR and and we'll know which. No, that sounds really good. Your hours do.
I wish you were. Yeah, I wish you were at the other end of the hall there. That sounds really good. In the end, I'm not sure it all works like that, but there's definitely a starvation going on for quality content, and even sub-quality content. Everything that used to be in a drive-in second feature is on Netflix.
Oh, I mean, that's why now, one of the biggest ways in the book business, writers are making bank is all the studios and streaming services keep optioning books. Hollywood has not had an original idea in 20 years. So books are one of the few areas where original ideas are still being produced. So literally the studios will option the film rights to the top 10 books on the bestseller list. Even if they have no intention or real desire to produce something, they'll buy the rights to it anyway, just to have it.
Right.
They need a project. What wonderful. Or this book has gotten really popular. Let's immediately go make a movie of it, sort of thing.
In the end, if it's your wallet and you have the choice between trying something entirely new and making, and if you have the choice and making a Marvel superhero movie that you're going to make, 100% or 200% return on your money.
Yes.
That's what the problem is. Like, okay,
of course.
The Brady Bunch worked. Why not do a Brady Bunch special or whatever? They're going to do the same stuff over and over because there's lower risk. And it sucks as a consumer. It sucks. But for them,
absolutely, yeah, it's
they're risk averse, and doing something that's already been done, it's easier for them. It's less risky.
Studios. Well, and for the big studios, all of their money nowadays is made overseas. So that's the first thing they look at is what will it do internationally, and really that's
of course
of how will it sell in China is really what they're asking. When they say international, they really mean can we sell it in China?
Right, and other Asian markets, yeah.
Yeah, and the Marvel movies do incredibly well over there, and that's why they are making them like Chevys. And everything else that would have been $100 million feature film is now all on Netflix and CBS Access and HBO Max and all these Hulu and all these other sorts of. I mean, all the other creativity is going everywhere else because the studios are drunk on comic book movie money.
Well, big visuals with characters that are understood in any language that were from a visual medium to begin with, comic books in this example, those are going to play in any language. A thoughtful sit down or, like a tense character story may or may not really, where's the audience for it? There might be here. Is it going to play in other languages? Not necessarily. You don't know. It's hard to say that.
Or you end up with weird cultural conventions that don't make sense or are accidentally offensive or things like that. And, a lot of these other properties just don't suffer from those problems,
I think I shared with you that I did an episode of Mortal Kombat, the series, the TV series. And the episode, I think, was A Balance of Power. And whatever it did to the Mortal Kombat universe, it was very perturbing to some people in countries that I may or may not even exist anymore. But I still catch flack, in several languages for whatever I did in that episode that pissed them off. I was just hired to come. I was hired by a great guy, Jay Cappy, to come in and do an episode. And it was really cool. It was great to have the opportunity, but it was there's a lot of mythology and a lot of universe to have to get your arms around in that, to do that. So I don't know, but it made an impression somewhere in Bulgaria or, East Krakistan. I don't know, but I'll still occasionally get a Facebook, message or an email or something asking me in some other language what the hell I did. So I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Oh my goodness. This is so much fun, but we have gone long. We usually only record for an hour, and we're at an hour and 20 minutes. So now is a good time to wrap things up. This is ordinarily where we would do plugs, but you don't really have anything to plug. So,
no, I'll write some and maybe you can throw it in the end of another one. Just say, oh yeah, by the way, Duke's plugging
absolutely.
this.
Yeah, the next time when you get back into it and you have something and whatnot, then we'll have to have that conversation then. But thank you so very much for coming on the Cameron Journal podcast. I appreciate it. It's been delightful.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, to just kind of take this journey and have interesting, fascinating conversations, and to give people a tiny smidgen of the, copious amounts of emails that we send back and forth to each other.
Yes, I enjoy that very much.
Yes, it was a lot of fun, and thank you for all the work you did on Rouges, even though we're defunct. I appreciate
that. Was fun too.
Time and energy you put into that. That was, yeah.
I will add, just for anybody who's thinking that they want to write like television or movies, there's nothing to keep them from doing it. I wish I had known that my second year of high school, because I would have put down some credits before graduation. I didn't know that you could do it. And when they start looking for a source on what to learn, don't necessarily get stuck in the latest, greatest screenplay writing book, or pay a bunch of money for software, or get in some kind of expensive undertaking to do that. Just go back and look at great, solid old writers like William Goldman and some of those guys, and just like look at some old books on screenwriting are going to be really, really good nowadays, because I've read some recent screenwriting books and they're weak and they miss an awful lot. And just remember, everything is in story. The script you can fix.
Yes, and the best part about all those old sorts of books and things is they are incredibly inexpensive. And
right.
Can be gotten a hold of at libraries and thrift shops and consignment stores and all that sort of thing. So your overhead is much, much less. So
yes, nothing's changed except a couple of minor things about format, and writing a screenplay is actually easier than it used to be, because directors want more power to interpret things. And so you actually have to put less into it than what we used to put into it. We used to have to write director-proof material, which current directors would find almost offensive, if not outright offensive, telling them where to put the camera and so forth. So you don't have to do that anymore. So I don't know. Anybody's got a pencil, have at it. There's nothing keeping you from doing it.
Yeah. Well, that's like when they used to do movies like Mary Poppins or Bread Knobs and Broomsticks. Everything was storyboarded because they were doing live action and animation. So everything had to be exact to match up with the animation, and it was just crazy.
Exactly. And a teleplay used to have to be, a director was hired a week before production. They had a week to get ready, and they needed some kind of guidance on paper. And nowadays it's done a little bit differently. Directors are given a little bit more power, a little more autonomy, which is fine. But you don't have to tell them every single thing. It can be two people. Just tell them what's happening, write the dialogue, and have at it. You can fix it all in the rewrite. So I just urge people to give it a shot. I mean, why not? There's like nothing keeping you from doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on the Cameron Journal podcast, and we'll have to do this again.
Cameron, thank you very much.
That's all for this episode of the Cameron Journal podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Visit us online at CameronJournal.com. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and I love to talk to my followers and listeners, so please feel free to get us on social media at Cameron Cowan on Twitter, and we'll see you next time on the Cameron Journal podcast.